Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, agents. I am Mountie Carl, and this is a Let's Talk on the Division Now. We are on the brink of the release of 1.6 and The Last Stand, which is the last Year 1 content being released, and it most likely will release on February 28th. This way, it doesn't take away from the Ghost Recon Open Beta, which starts this week, and it doesn't take away from the Ghost Recon launch, which happens on March 7th. Now, we have to ask ourselves some very important questions about the Division after this release. And the main one is, will there be Year 2 content? And if there is, who will buy it? Now, as a whole, I have enjoyed the content being put out, Underground, Survival, even The Last Stand during the PTS, but the consensus from a lot of players online and on Reddit and on Twitter is that the content put out isn't DLC worthy and it wasn't worth paying for. And a lot of Division players do enjoy the content that they're playing right now, and with the final PvP piece falling in place, there is always mixed reactions to the next year as to whether they're going to do Year 2 content, whether they're going to do more updates, whether they are done after this. And it's hard to say because they've come out with, for Last Stand, they're going to have microtransactions, which makes me feel like they're going to try and move over to a more, self-sustaining model for the player base. So if we buy microtransactions, there might be more content that they put out, because the more money we put out and give to Massive, the more they're going to have, some sort of development time to go ahead and do stuff with. And it's right for the players to feel slighted. Now, I'm not going to tell them that, they're wrong or they're feeling wrong, but a lot of players feel ripped off. There hasn't really been a story update or mission type content released in any of the DLCs, and the DLC that has been released is obviously a bit light for the price tag. I've heard that some feel that these are simply mod add-ons, and in some cases, because they have, a completely separate feel from the actual game. Many people even feel like the Last Stand update should have been part of the original game design upon release. And looking at the older videos, the one that came out for E3, I can't say that I disagree with them, because that kind of looks like what the Last Stand is. And I mean, the survival DLC is essentially just the addition of the drinking water and the eating and the survival aspect of what we saw in the E3 video as well. And it's a different capacity altogether, yes, but it was originally part of the game, and yet they didn't make it a part of the game. And I think that they really missed out on an opportunity to add that in, and players would have adjusted and adapted to being, in a more survivalistic environment. But they didn't go that route. They went with the let's just make it a game mode and an add-on and move from there. Now, it is unfair to us to say that Massive and Ubisoft, or at least Massive, hasn't given anything to the players, since they did give us Falcon's Lost for free, they gave us Clear Sky for free, but when it was shown that games like The Witcher 3 gives you almost an entirely new game add-on, putting you in a story for another 20 plus hours of gameplay, it's hard to argue that Division players aren't getting their money's worth. Personally, I feel like I've gotten my money's worth out of the Division. If I hadn't, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. Now, if I say this without being crucified, I feel like Massive, on the other hand, has done a great job at several things. Even with the light content for the DLCs, I have played a crap out of the Division and I've gotten my money's worth for the most part. Massive has done an excellent job supporting, listening to the community, supporting the game, and trying to change it for the better so that they keep their player base and their loyalty base up. These things aren't easy to do either. We asked them to move mountains and they still need to do it stone by stone. And so there is a frustration that we're having among the community, but for the most part, Massive is doing a lot behind the scenes that we aren't seeing. And whether it's ETF or something like that, but Massive is going above and beyond what most developers will do for their community game. Now that I have given my props to Massive for the job they've done, let's return to the DLC talk. In the past, especially when I've started a PC game, DLC didn't exist when I was first playing. If you wanted something, you had to mod it in yourself, or you waited for the expansion pack, or you had to go into the INI file and actually update it yourself. The DLC that we expect is in this vein still. Expansions and DLC should be an add-on to the game that is worthy of the original title and adds to the experience. Back when I was young in the game industry, I had the opportunity to work on Medal of Honor Breakthrough and Medal of Honor Pacific Assault. Medal of Honor Breakthrough was an expansion for one of the most popular multiplayer games ever released, which was Medal of Honor Allied Assault. Expansion packs were a way to keep players engaged longer with the original game and to put out a new piece of the game that wasn't a part of the original and wasn't ever intended to be part of the original. It was to provide new missions and new experiences, and this seems to have been lost on many game companies today, where they're just putting out clothing items or what used to be unlockables for the game. And now, however, the trend is moving towards releasing an unfinished game and finishing it with a day one patch or something else, or several more patches, a new content release, and then DLC after that. Games back in the early days didn't have the ability to be updated like they are on the fly today, and thus developers get a little lazy on the games. We see it during every release, massive amounts of bugs, crashes, hot fixes, all because publishers want the content out and making money in their pocket, whether the game is done or not. This is both positive and negative effects within the community. The positives are that we get the game in a much more timely fashion. Half the games we play today would have never made it out in the years that they did if it hadn't been for day one patches and being able to be released on the fly. The downside is that we don't see that positive because we're looking at the game that's untested and unfinished, and we throw it at the wall and we tell ourselves we'll never trust that company again, we'll never pre-order, and half of the time people say this game is still in beta, or we're just beta testing the game for the developer. And to that statement, it's mainly true. In order for us to get games in our hands, we must accept the new way developers are giving us games. Now, if they told us that they were going to be doing this, we would probably have less of a problem with it, but we probably wouldn't buy it. And we think of a beta as a free game that we test out or try. Back in the day, when a beta was originally released, it wasn't just a demo of the game trying to get us to buy it. Now, all betas are just the demo versions getting you interested enough to buy the game and testing it out. They don't really care about bugs. They want feedback, sure, but they don't really care about the bugs you find, because if they did, we'd be playing a most recent version of the game, most likely one that they submitted to Microsoft or Sony or something like that to get us interested, to get us trying to help them fix bugs for the day one patch. But that's not what they're doing. That's not what they're doing. They're putting out a demo version. Some of these are months old releases. Now, alpha tests that they're doing today, now these are really where gamers are looking for bugs and testing things. That's what a beta used to be. When you used to do a closed beta, you were in there, you were looking for bugs, you were testing it. They hadn't been sent for certification yet for pressing or anything like that. And we're just trying to help them get their game as well polished as it is, because they don't have 500,000 testers, which, looking at like World of Warcraft, when I beta tested that, they don't have millions of players to be able to go into a game and test these things out. They don't have millions of testers, so everything can't be covered. Even if your content for The Division never comes, many gamers who play The Division, especially Division YouTubers who make money off the content, they want that year 2 content. And with The Last Stand, I can see a whole slew of game modes and content that could be released, like Capture the Flag and various sets of PvP engagements. But are you willing to pay for it? I too would love more story content, even if it's just an incursion into Aaron Keener's new hideout base in the Dark Zone to stop him, and just, bring closure to that circle. If we're going to do it over and over again, like some Bill Murray-esque Groundhog Day nightmare raid where we see a story loop close, that's what we want. Will that happen? It's doubtful. I think PvP content and other game modes are more likely to happen, but never count out Massive doing, something like that. And the only evidence of year 2 content that we're seeing is, some, leaked developer put year 2 Division on his resume, and that's really it. And that doesn't really say anything. Year 2 could have been, he worked on The Last Stand in 2017, or for release in 2017, whatever that is. There's nothing. For the most part, when I worked in the industry, you didn't get to put stuff that you did in the future because it was all under NDA. So if that guy put something like that on his resume, then he is breaking an NDA and would be opening himself up to a legal issue. But that's not That's neither here nor there. But anyways, that is my time. I could go on and on about this subject, but I really want to keep covering other topics, like one brought up by one of my subscribers about crafting and how that system needs to make a huge comeback. And if you're watching this and you either really like my content or you're a Division player who's really looking for all of that stuff. And so I want to hear the feedback on, the Division Year 1 content and how you thought that went. Like, it doesn't matter if you thought it was good or bad. I just want to hear was it worth your money? Was it worth your time? Was it worth your effort? Was there anything you were disappointed with? Will you buy Year 2 content if it was announced? Will you be moving on after The Last Stand away from the Division? These are all questions I want to hear from. Any ideas that you guys have for Year 2 content, stuff like that. I just want to hear it all. I know I was kind of, in my last video, I was talking about, all this speculation about Year 2 content and all this stuff. We haven't heard anything about Year 2 content. We haven't heard if there's going to be a season pass, and it's hard to say whether or not it is going to happen. But if it is, I'm sure that after The Last Stand we're gonna hear about it, but probably not until sometime in mid-March or even later than that. It's they're gonna be looking at the numbers. They're gonna need something to keep people around, and if they're willing to do that, they're gonna put out more content because it's making them money. It's probably gonna depend on how much money they make off The Last Stand that people makes the decision, or microtransactions, which makes the decision whether or not they can afford to keep the dev team around to keep developing content for that. So these are all questions. Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, drop a like on it. Consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. But until then, for all of us here at The Division Let's Talk, I am Mountie Curl, and we'll see you in the last DLC of Year 1. Mountie out.